果てるように燃ゆる月暁に沈みゆく
I remember a time in anime where death was anything but concrete, specifically in battle shonen. One could die, but just as easily be brought back to life through, say, with magic. However, in recent memory, the anime fans have shifted that notion in the opposite direction. They are hungered for a more serious, more damning approach to the shonen genre, one where the character's status within the anime meant nothing for their security in battle. Most of all, when and if they would to fall, they would stay fallen. Luckily, anime fans got what they were hoping for, and that was Attack on Titan. The industry took note to Attack on Titan's wild success and started scoping around for successors. But now, anime fans abroad, I guess, took one look at Akame ga Kill and were sold immediately. Yes, while this is a good element to add into an anime, is that all that's necessary to keep the hungry viewers satisfied? No. Where to begin? The idea of a revolution that White Fox tried to go for honestly should have been the aim of the show from the great beginning. Instead, the anime seems to use forgettable and pointless turf wars with comical goons until they decide to finally cobble together an actual plot. It didn't work here since the anime has no idea what an actual revolution would take. Sure, it's fiction, but come on, are you telling me the only actual power structure in the capital was some kid and his fat uncle? That is ridiculous. Anyone can write such a simplified story that leads into my problems with the rest of this entire series. That everything is painted in such broad strokes. There's good and then there's bad. As a serious and ambitious setting of a small league of assassins being the only hope to overthrow a corrupt capital, it sure is damn well pretentious at that. Because when the show is not fighting, but to try and flesh out its characters and I don't know, develop them, we instead get some quote-unquote whores or some females who distract us with these silly boob jokes as a horrible excuse of being this comedic sex rom-com in a dark fantasy. There are some good goddamn differences by being sexually aroused and taking in mature context seriously. Like how in the second episode, Tatsi, I'm gonna call him Tatsi, is moaning over how he recently saw his friends being killed by some psycho chick, then some boob whore, aka boobs, comes in and puts her boobs on his face, literally puts his boobs on his face, surprisingly saying, hey, if the writing is dull and shallow, we might as well sell sex as an excuse to fill actual good writing into this really crap anime, right? The directing feels the exact same style of what a shonen writer uses, but downgraded. The villains of the show have absolute no reason or depth and personality for killing or abusing the people in the show. It's like,
hey kids, look at this horrible psycho who is killing all these people that we know nothing about.
Now look, everyone who watches this show will think that it's mature, but in fact it's just being pretentious. That is the one biggest issue I have with the story. It tries to be dark and edgy, yet it also tries to milk a little bit of that paper by attempt of sexual appeal. Why? It does have one redeeming factor though. If you really ignore how much an absolute train wreck this show is, then it's worth to be viewed as a nice parody of shonen, that it indulge in self-awareness on how bad yet corny it actually is. Now, the matter of how things wrap up in Akame ga Kill, like Leon's death or boobs, why didn't she try to save herself? She had hours between killing Burger King Man and kicking it in some alley, so why didn't she seek medical attention for those wounds to the gut? Cutting the Emperor Makoto's head off was rather ridiculous too, but hey, I don't think the Middle Ages had much of a youth penal code, I guess. And hell, wouldn't it seem more satisfying to see Burger King Man in that position instead? You know, the actual cause of all the corruption and misery? But seeing his face getting smashed into a pulp was okay, I guess. Also, why is Akame being hunted down anyway? She helped liberate the goddamn country. So if that's the case, why aren't Wave and Run put to death for supporting a comically evil regime that was just overthrown? Instead of we get a final scene of them two talking on how great Captain Esdef was. You know, the same sadistic lady responsible for deaths of the thousands and who made no doubt of talking how much she loves torturing people. They even think she had a chance at Tatsumi on the afterlife and won't burn in hell for being the worst type of person imaginable. How cute. Anyhow, there is also an epilogue with a bunch of people I don't care about. Oh, and Akame is a fighting nomad apparently, even though she's a fucking hero, but whatever, the show is just over and that's how it wraps up. You know what? That's fine. And it wraps up that way because I never have to see it ever again. So now I get my life back. The characters themselves started out decently handled at best. Your main dude, Tatsumi, meets all and it all comes off well and good, then the story progresses. As the episodes wear on the character development, which was scarce to begin with, becomes bare minimum to nothing at all. You literally have no bond with these characters, and so much as Akame got killed tries to suck some emotion of the viewer in the beginning, that attempt totally dissipates over time and quickly realizes how lack of sympathy you share for any of the situations that get thrown at you. If any emotion is still lingered on, it's probably somewhere between frustration and, I don't know,
I'm so over this shit
kind of a feeling. I honestly think the show could have gained a lot more overall positive recognition if it had trend more strategically on something as sensitive as the main cast, considering how they all had some worth mentioning personalities differences to contribute to the death train Akame ga Kill set out to be. An emotional impact could have set Akame ga Kill in a unique light to some, but alas, the route was destroyed rather early. I can't say I'm impressed with Akame ga Kill in the least. I don't mind the anyone can die being a selling point. Heck, that's a good thing. Attack on Titan did it, and look at that, it succeeded. Akame ga Kill went it the exact wrong way entirely. What I mean here is with something like Gats, for example. You knew a lot of people were gonna die in the series, and it did a great job to the least with blindsiding you with these said deaths. In Akame ga Kill, aside from a few characters in the beginning to set the tone, and some toward the end, Tatsumi especially, they all felt predictable and formatic. This is a result of tossing in intrusive backdrop stories for characters right as they're about to die. This is an inefficient way to create tragedy. It's simply an exercise in sending one poorly developed character to the slaughter, one after another. The plot itself was fairly linear and uninspired as well. No plot twists, and what you see in the few episodes is all you get through the entire anime. Just kill the bad guys and toss in a few more characters to fill in the body bags for later on. That's the motive, and that's the intention of Akame ga Kill. Now look, Tatsumi is apparently a total buff, I hear from the masses of casuals, because of having the balls to simply kill people right off the bat, his exact opinion of having to handle his enemies. Heck, the villains in this show have some of the loosiest pieces of writing I've ever seen in a shonen, because they are really just a bunch of one-dimensional psychos who are really just there to make everything all gory and jazz as the masses will all of a sudden think it's a very mature content. It's not. At least in something like Naruto or Bleach, there are actually two options. You either talk or you fight. But in Akame, it's just kill. There were other casuals completely missing the point and stating that they're getting rather bored with their so-called Narutos and fairy tales, One Pieces, and now they say Akame is more mature because the violence was awesome and uncensored. Look, I know, you may have the way of your own opinion, but there's a difference between being mature and being pretentious. Being mature means the fiction respects its audience and takes its themes in a serious and realistic manner. Being pretentious is an act of trying to respect its audience but failing because it does not take its themes in a very unrealistic manner. You know what? I just remembered. Shilei's death was done very poorly. It really just felt like a token death to attempt to remind the viewers that there's a real sense of danger, when there really isn't. There was never enough of a spotlight on Shilei to get the viewers to care about her. She had an intro episode, but was that really enough to get people to care about her death enough to warrant a full half of an episode of screaming and montages trying to push in the feels? No. That kind of post-death stuff is okay when a main character dies. A main character. After being around long enough for us to really care about. But Shilei was arguably a side character who only really got any characterization for like 20 minutes. I found myself just wanting for the whole
Oh no, Shilei's dead!
crap to be over so that we could all just move on something else that's better. But that never happened. And guess what? They did the same thing for every semi-focal character who died. I was just one unhappy camper with every death scene possible in this show. So now I'm gonna try to calm down the dreadful story and characters, and we'll talk about the art and animation. So there's nothing really much to say in the art department. The art style is generic and somewhat uninspired, but it works, if nothing else. White Fox uses shadows that are often left at an unnatural pitch black, and the backgrounds are largely poorly detailed and unappealing with their slapdash construction and jury colors. Designs are simple but varied enough, whether it be the monsters, weapons, etc. The animation is standard fare, there's nothing else to really say about it, and while the character designs of Akame ga Kill don't make up for much of the poorly designed environments, some other more interesting venues wouldn't go unappreciated. The use of stock footage doesn't really help much either, and the same transformation sequence can be found in almost every fighting sequence, and after a while, it gets rather irritating. Like the art, there really is nothing much to say here. The soundtrack was composed by Taku Iwasaki, who composed the soundtracks for JoJo Bizarre Adventure and Gurren Lagann. Although, I can't remember the background music for that one, which seems hard to imagine what it was like for this anime either. But I remember it being okay for both of those, but there is nothing truly memorable in the score for the viewer to take notice. The soundtrack consists mostly of forgettable classical pieces, and for the opening and ending themes, there really is nothing in those areas except generic J-rock and ballad songs. So overall, needless to say, it's not his best work. The voice acting was alright and reasonably fits. However, even if the series had a phenomenal sound section, it simply cannot compensate for the painful, horrendous story and characters. Now, if you guys have survived this long, you guys are very familiar with my anime gone wrongs. I have a section called Biggest Complaints, and I have 5 in particular that I will discuss and tell you what I hate the most of this goddamn show. Let's begin. Number 1. To say that Akame ga Kill has some tone shifts is a vast understatement. There are several instances where a character would die and something traumatic would happen, and not even a couple minutes later, they would throw in jokes at the viewer to make them feel satisfied. And each and every time my reaction would be somewhere in the ballpark of,
"Really? We're gonna try and make a joke out of here and now?"
And unfortunately, that does make these scenes feel cheapened, as if they didn't matter in the long run because they don't give us enough time to digest what just happened. Nope, we just laugh now and accept it. Number 2, characterization, or rather lack of it. Prime examples of bad characterization in Akame ga Kill are seen in Shuru and Shura. Both arguably being psychopaths, it was certain that their twisted views had to be forged by past events. The main problem is that we never get any entanglement events that make the development of such psychopathic characteristics feel natural. We just have to quote-unquote go with it. One could make the argument that characters could just be in a crazy state of mind that's not fueled by anything in particular. The issue with that in a narrative is that you lose impact. Impact that was clearly going for when they both died. It is impossible to invoke real sympathy when Pretentious behavior isn't backed up by a story that the viewer can connect with emotionally. They tried to do so, and they failed. Number 3, character deaths are also poorly executed in Akame ga Kill. A several lack of visible build-up and aftermath decreases the overall shock value. Unfortunately, this goes for villains and protagonists alike. Hell, a good number of villains make their entrance, were introduced to the viewers, and then die, all within 1 to 2 episodes. It's a bad sign when viewers don't bother to memorize names because they instantly know there's no point whatsoever. Another problem that makes deaths in this show so lackluster is the amount of time between them. Absolutely 0. All of these points put together the turn of string of character dismisses into an absolute laughingstock ordeal. Number 5, world building, which surprisingly is practically non-existent in this series. Simple things like actual names of locations are painfully absent. The country in which the story takes place is unnamed. The city gets a lousy name called Imperial City, like come on. Naturally, this goes for neighboring nations and tribes as well, despite the slight implication of various political ties. Danger beasts and vital history are mentioned every now and then, but not in a timely manner, which only makes it seem like plug-in information or plot devices. It's frustrating because everything is there. It's just so hard to immerse yourself in a world like Akame ga Kill because everything is significantly not expanded upon. And finally, number 5, Akame ga Kill's power-up, which in my opinion makes no sense in context with the rest of the show. Akame cuts herself by activating her trump card, which is nonsense. Early in the series, she claimed that polishing her blade was nerve-wracking because the slightest mistake would kill, which means she had no idea that it was her trump card. In episode 24, she cuts her neck with all confidence in the world and receives a power-up. Like, what? Quick question. Where did this trump card come before anyhow? Given how there's no drawbacks, can't we assume it would have been smart to use this earlier? Like during her battle with Kurumi? As it is, it definitely feels like a plot device power-up here. Esdeath not killing Akame immediately with her ass pull, yeah, ass pull, her freeze time warp time power, is kind of dumb. But hey, anime villains, man. They always gotta drag it out so you can taunt their foes to bolster their ego or some shit like that. Also, she explodes into sparkly dust after chasing her in ice with Tatsumi after losing to Akame. Ah, fucking... okay, sure. I can't even say that this show was near okay success. The direction, the production value were at most part mediocre or bad. It's vampant, unfunny, and weakly directed piece of third-grade popcorn entertainment, and that's all as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure if this is a bad action title as the shitfest that we humans call Tokyo Ghoul from earlier this year, but it's downright there. So, of course, for my score for that I do for all my anime reviews and anime gone wrongs, from story, characters, animation, sound, and personal enjoyment, I'm gonna give Akame ga Kill, or Akame ga Shit, a total score of 3.15 out of 10. And definitely state this as an anime gone wrong and refuse anyone out there to watch this anime. So, some people may say you should actually enjoy it for what it's worth, but I'm an anime critic, and critics are never afraid to actually criticize on what is bad, and the show like this is just being pretentious, which makes me really annoyed if a show attempts such a sin. However, it's definitely more tolerable than Tokyo Ghoul since that show fails in every sense, making it an intensely mature thriller and becoming a fucking battle shonen with even worse plot conveniences. Now, some have stated that Akame ga Kill is a guilty pleasure, very similar how Guilty Crown presented itself into the anime community. But after some careful consideration, I've come to the conclusion that this is not necessary. Why else would Akame ga Kill be under the rank of Guilty Crown, with both sides of the community, the critics and the casuals, all sharing an acceptable understanding on liking a terrible show like Guilty Crown and not Akame ga Kill? Look here. Each of these series here share several distinct features and lack thereof. They have a subsequential fan base of predominantly whiny children unable to comprehend complete sentences, which is also worth mentioning, but I will not fault them for that alone. However, the anime series themselves typically promote themselves as childish and fashioned with an extensive quantity of self-hype that seems to specifically target these gullible sort of individuals. Now, despite that, Akame ga Kill is much worse than any of the failures mentioned above put out. These so-called Guilty Crown series have such an absence of drama and self-pity, and such a lack of logic. They are driven on impulse, consequently lack much direction or comprehensible coherence in their own actions. They're also like pornography in a way, by how they promote no meaningful value. Take Gun Gale Online for instance. Should any man conduct themselves in such demeanor that he forgets his own current girlfriend every time he stumbles upon a new female's face? Or how about Mahoka, where the moral of the story seems to be that incest is a-okay? If you don't think those two series focus on any of that very much at all, respectively, well, after all, not thinking seems to be a specialty of people who enjoy these tasteful works. Well, now that's out of the way, this has been my anime gone wrong of Akame ga Kill. I know, I slandered communities, I slandered people's fan base, I slandered people's taste and what they love in anime. I know, I could be an asshole, but this is something that I had to say. I don't care if you dislike, like this video, comment your hatred down below, unsubscribe, do whatever you want. This is something that I personally had to give note on how I feel about people give unexcused excuses for anime to say that they're good. Not to say that you can't love these anime, I don't care if you guys do, that's perfectly fine, that's your guys' own subjective opinion. But when you guys say that an anime is critically good, or it's good man, you gotta read the manga, you gotta read this, you gotta wait for the second season, you gotta do that. That's what I personally hate for this community. Look, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you guys want to see a more in-depth review of Akame ga Kill that takes more deeper analysis than me just ranting about it, go check out Mr. Reckless Penguin's review on his channel, which I'll link right here on the screen and as well down in the description below. You guys can watch his 27-minute video on how he explains on how it's bad, just like I did, but a more summed up rant version. So, anyways, my name is JcGreen, and I'll see you guys in my next anime-related video. Peace, guys.